Exodus chapter 6. God said to Moses, "Now you'll see what I'll do to Pharaoh. With a strong hand he'll send them out free, and with a strong hand he'll drive them out of his land." God continued speaking to Moses, reassuring him, "I am God. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as the strong God. But my name God, I am present, I was not known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the country in which they lived as sojourners. But now I've heard the groanings of the Israelites, whom the Egyptians continue to enslave, and I've remembered my covenant. Therefore tell the Israelites, I am God. I will bring you out from under the cruel labor of Egypt. I will rescue you from slavery. I will redeem you, intervening with great acts of judgment. I'll take you as my own people, and I'll be God to you. You'll know that I am God, your God, who brings you out from under the cruel, hard labor of Egypt. I'll bring you into the land that I promised to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and give it to you as your own country. I am God." But when Moses delivered this message to the Israelites, they didn't even hear him. They were that beaten down in spirit by the harsh slave conditions. Then God said to Moses, "Go and speak to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he will release the Israelites from this land." Moses answered God, "Look, the Israelites won't even listen to me. How do you expect Pharaoh to? And besides, I stutter." But God again laid out the facts to Moses and Aaron regarding the Israelites and Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and again he commanded them to lead the Israelites out of the land of Egypt. These are the heads of the tribes: sons of Reuben, Israel's firstborn, Hanok, Palu, Hezron, Carmi. These are the families of Reuben. The sons of Simeon, Jumul, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Saul, the son of a Canaanite woman. These are the families of Simeon. These are the names of the sons of Levi in the order of their birth: Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Levi lived 137 years. The sons of Gershon by family: Libni and Shimi. The sons of Kohath: Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uzal. Kohath lived to be 133. The sons of Merari: Mahli and Mushi. These are the sons of Levi in order of their birth. Amram married his aunt Jochebed, and he had Aaron and Moses. Amram lived to be 137. The sons of Ishar: Korah, Negavek, and Zikri. The sons of Uzali: Mishal, Elishphan, and Sifri. Aaron married Elishba, the daughter of Elimelech, and the sister of Nashon. She had Nebad and Ibu, Eliza, and Ephelomah. The sons of Korah: Asir, Elkanah, and Abisphah. These are the families of the Korahites. Aaron's son Eleazar married one of the daughters of Putul, and she had Phinehas. These are the heads of the Levite families, family by family. This is the Aaron and Moses whom God ordered, bring the Israelites out of the land of Egypt, clan by clan. These are the men, Moses and Aaron, who told Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to release the Israelites from Egypt. And that's how things stood when God next spoke to Moses in Egypt. God addressed Moses saying, "I am God. Tell Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, everything I say to you." And Moses answered, "Look at me, I stutter. Why would Pharaoh listen to me?" Exodus chapter 8. Oh, one moment. Just starting that chapter again. Exodus chapter 7. God told Moses, "Look at me. I'll make you as a god to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. You are to speak everything that I command you, and your brother Aaron will tell it to Pharaoh. Then he will release the Israelites from this land. At the same time, I'm going to put Pharaoh's back up and follow it up by filling Egypt with signs and wonders. Pharaoh is not going to listen to you, but I will have my way against Egypt and bring out my soldiers, my people, the Israelites, from Egypt by mighty acts of judgment. The Egyptians will realize that I am God when I step in and take the Israelites out of their country." Moses and Aaron did exactly what God commanded. Moses was 80 and Aaron was 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. Then God spoke to Moses and Aaron. He said, "When Pharaoh speaks to you and says, 'Prove yourselves, perform a miracle,' then tell Aaron, 'Take your staff and throw it down in front of Pharaoh. It will turn into a snake.'" And Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did what God commanded. Aaron threw his staff down in front of Pharaoh and his servants, and it turned into a snake. Pharaoh called his wise men and sorcerers. The magicians of Egypt did the same thing by their spells. Each man threw down his staff, and they all turned into snakes. But then Aaron's staff swallowed their staffs. Yet Pharaoh was as stubborn as ever. He wouldn't listen to them, just as God had said. God said to Moses, "Pharaoh is a stubborn man. He refuses to release the people. First thing in the morning, go and meet Pharaoh as he goes down to the river. At the shore of the Nile, take the staff that turned into a snake and say to him, 'God, the God of the Hebrews, sent me to you with this message. Release my people so they can worship me in the wilderness. So far, you haven't listened. This is how you'll know that I am God. I'm going to take this staff that I'm holding and strike the Nile River. The water will turn into blood. The fish of the Nile will die. The Nile will stink, and the Egyptians won't be able to drink the Nile water." God said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, take your staff and wave it over the waters of Egypt, over its rivers, its canals, its ponds, all its bodies of water, so that they turn to blood. There'll be blood everywhere in Egypt, even in pots and pans." Moses and Aaron did exactly as God commanded them. Aaron raised his staff and hit the water in the Nile, and Pharaoh and his servants were watching. All the water in the Nile turned into blood. The fish in the Nile died. The Nile stank, and the Egyptians couldn't drink the Nile water. The blood was everywhere in Egypt. But the magicians of Egypt did the same thing with their incantations. Still, Pharaoh remained stubborn. He wouldn't listen to them as God had said. He spun around and went home, never giving it a second thought. But all the Egyptians had to dig inland from the river for water because they couldn't drink the Nile water. 7 days went by after God had struck the Nile. Exodus chapter 8. God said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and tell him God's message. Release my people so they can worship me. If you refuse to release them, I'm warning you, I'll hit the whole country with frogs. The Nile will swarm with frogs. They'll come up into your houses, into your bedrooms, into your beds, into your servants' quarters, among the people, into your ovens and pots and pans. They'll be all over you, all over everyone, frogs everywhere, on everything and in everything." God said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, wave your staff over the rivers and canals and ponds, bring up frogs on the land of Egypt." Aaron stretched out his staff over the waters of Egypt, and a mob of frogs came up and covered the country. But again, the magicians did the same thing using their incantations. They also produced frogs in Egypt. Pharaoh called in Moses and Aaron and said, "Pray to God to get rid of these frogs. I'll release the people so that they can make their sacrifices and worship God." Moses said to Pharaoh, "Certainly, set the time. When do you want the frogs out of here, away from your servants and people, and out of your houses? You'll be rid of frogs except for those in the Nile." "Make it tomorrow." Moses said, "Tomorrow it is. So you'll realize that there is no God like our God. The frogs will be gone, and you and your houses and servants and your people free of frogs. The only frogs left will be the ones in the Nile." Moses and Aaron left Pharaoh, and Moses prayed to God about the frogs he had brought on Pharaoh. God responded to Moses' prayer. The frogs died off, houses, courtyard, fields, all free of frogs. They piled the frogs in heaps, and the country reeked of dead frogs. But when Pharaoh saw that he had some breathing room, he got stubborn again and wouldn't listen to Moses and Aaron, just as God had said. God said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, take your staff and strike the dust. The dust will turn into gnats all over Egypt." He did it. Aaron grabbed his staff and struck the dust of the earth. It turned into gnats all over the people and animals. All the dust of the earth turned into gnats everywhere in Egypt. The magicians tried to produce gnats with their spells, but this time they couldn't do it. There were gnats everywhere, all over people and animals. The magicians said to Pharaoh, "This is God's doing," but Pharaoh was stubborn and wouldn't listen, just as God had said. God said to Moses, "Get up early in the morning and confront Pharaoh as he goes down to the water. Tell him God's message. Release my people so they can worship me. If you don't release my people, I'll release swarms of flies on you, your servants, your people, and your homes. The houses of the Egyptians and even the ground under their feet will be thick with flies. But when it happens, I'll get Goshen, where my people live, aside as a sanctuary. No flies in Goshen. That will show you that I am God in this land. I'll make a sharp distinction between your people and mine. This sign will occur tomorrow." And God did just that. Thick swarms of flies in Pharaoh's palace and the house of his servants. All over Egypt, the country ruined by flies. Pharaoh called Moses in, and Aaron also, and said, "Go ahead, sacrifice to your God, but do it here in this country." Moses said, "That would not be wise. What we sacrifice to our God would give great offense to Egyptians. If we openly sacrifice what is so deeply offensive to Egyptians, they'll kill us. Let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to our God just as he instructed us." Pharaoh said, "All right, I'll release you to go and sacrifice to your God in the wilderness. Only don't go too far. Now pray for me." Moses said, "As soon as I leave here, I will pray to God that tomorrow the flies will leave Pharaoh, his servants, and his people. But don't play games with us and change your mind about releasing us to sacrifice to God." Moses left Pharaoh and prayed to God. God did what Moses asked. He got rid of the flies from Pharaoh and his servants and his people. There wasn't a fly left, but Pharaoh became stubborn once again and wouldn't release his people.
Matthew 16. One day the Pharisees and Sadducees came to test Jesus, demanding that he show them a miraculous sign from heaven to prove his authority. He replied, "You know the saying, red sky at night means fair weather tomorrow. Red sky in the morning means foul weather all day. You know how to interpret the weather signs in the sky, but you don't know how to interpret the signs of the times. Only an evil, adulterous generation would demand a miraculous sign, but the only sign I will give them is the sign of the prophet Jonah." Then Jesus left them and went away. Later, after they crossed to the other side of the lake, the disciples discovered they had forgotten to bring any bread. "Watch out," Jesus warned them. "Beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees." At this they began to argue with each other because they hadn't brought any bread. Jesus knew what they were saying, so he said, "You have so little faith. Why are you arguing with each other about having no bread? Don't you understand even yet? Don't you remember the 5,000 I fed with 5 loaves and the baskets of leftovers you picked up? Or the 4,000 I fed with 7 loads and the large baskets of leftovers you picked up? Why can't you understand that I'm not talking about bread? So again I say, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Then at last they understood that he wasn't speaking about the yeast in bread, but about the deceptive teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do the people say that the Son of Man is?" "Well," they replied, "some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets." Then he asked them, "But who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "You are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any human being. Now I say to you that you are Peter, which means rock, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the powers of hell will not conquer it. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven, and whatever you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven." Then he sternly warned the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. From then on, Jesus began to tell his disciples